Hello and welcome to the Buckets and Tea NBA show. I'm your host, Cathryn Naiker. Thanks so much for tuning into this week's episode. Today, joining me, my buddy in recovering from cold and flu season. She is the writer and creator of Basketball Feelings, and I'm sure you've seen her work on many other platforms. It's Katie Heindl. How you doing?
I'm hanging in, as we've established.
We're hanging in. Yep.
There might be some muting. If I laugh too much, I'm going to cough. So there'll be probably some muting breaks.
That's fair. I've got some Ricolas.
There you go. I got my tea. I got my honey lemon tea on deck.
There you go. I think I only have 4 of these left. I've really
got to re-up.
I've really gone through the bag here. I do need to re-up. But yeah, let's get into it. I mean, first and foremost, Darko really put himself on the map this week with an epic rant at the referees after a very, sort of heartbreaking loss to the Lakers on the Raptors front. The disparity was 20-2 free throws in the game, or in the fourth quarter. In the fourth quarter. This went everywhere. CNN picked it up. I saw BBC Sports picked it up.
Across the pond.
It went across the pond. That's how big this was. I saw people from fan bases, not the Raptors, sticking up for Darko, and he kind of, endeared himself, I feel, amongst the NBA hopefuls across the land and beyond. As of recording this Thursday afternoon, a fine has not yet been announced for this rant, so we are anticipating it. We were just joking before we started recording that Katie and I, we did a podcast last year. We were talking about what a mess the Brooklyn Nets were, and then they announced Steve Nash was fired as we were recording the pod. So we're thinking something similar could happen today. We will see. So we won't be able to react to that portion of it. But Katie, how did you feel about this epic rant?
I mean, I kind of liked it. I feel like it always takes a rant. It takes a coaching rant and a subsequent fine for especially a new coach, a rookie coach like this first year NBA coach to kind of get on the map. Mm-hmm. And I think also not to his detriment, but to the fact that he's the coach of the Raptors. A lot of people aren't paying attention this year or at all. So I think that also helps. People turn their heads a little bit and be like, oh, okay, maybe I should sit up and pay attention to this guy. As someone who's been around Darko and been in these pressers and has just seen I think the last time I was in a presser, I zoned out and was like, man, this guy has such deep laugh lines. He's such a sunny, you know what I mean? He's just such a sunny, positive guy. And that's kind of what we've seen through his character and what he's tried to bring to the team. So I actually sort of liked it as a counter to it, because it also reminded me oh yeah, it's not really healthy or good to place kind of one-dimensionality on people in that sense. And yeah, of course he's capable of getting fired up, especially you want him to get fired up for his players. I think it was cool to see that. I think there's been some pushback on the Scotty Barnes stuff, but why wouldn't he say that about one of his team's best guys?
Yeah.
So yeah, generally I liked it. I've liked the memes. I think my favorite one is the screen cap of him at the beginning of the rant. His eyes are really big, and it's just it's shame is the text. I like that. I might have saved that onto my camera roll.
Yeah, there's been some screenshots of a very good depiction of his lower teeth. You know what I mean? How you don't always see lower teeth on people unless they're viscerally angry.
Yeah.
And it's wow. The lower jaw was out.
I didn't even think about that, but yeah. No, generally I think it was positive. I don't think I've really, the negative stuff I've seen has been pretty stupid. And
I agree. I mean, let's talk about the Scotty Barnes side of this too.
Mm-hmm.
You said, he's been getting a lot of backlash for calling Scotty Barnes the face of the league. That is so ridiculous on my part. I mean, I completely agree with you. He is his coach. He'll never be the face of the league if his coach doesn't believe he can be.
Exactly.
I mean, why wouldn't he say that? Like, I just thought that was so ridiculous. And I think
Mhm.
like, you know, the Stephen A's of the world, like they have to be somewhat antagonistic in order to stay interesting. And so I think
Mhm.
that's kind of why, you know, some people choose to do that. But yeah, I mean, he's his coach and like it's his job to stand up for his guys. And I agree. I think the players needed to see this side of Darko as well.
Mhm.
You know, they needed to see him being angry and sticking up for them and not just like, you know, pizza parties all the time and stuff like that. Like I actually think it really meant a lot to them as well.
Yeah, I think so too, because I think like positive coaching, I'm obviously a big fan of it. But I think, you know, to go back to what I said earlier, just like to understand that there's going to be layers to that as well. And like sometimes being positive is like tough love on your athletes, like on your
Mhm.
team. And sometimes like being positive like that means standing up and like sticking your neck out for and like calling out BS when you
Right.
see it. You know, I think it's also really funny. It was like almost a year to the day that Fred VanVleet got slapped with a fine for this
Right.
calling out the same dude. So I think, yeah, I think all in all, it's positive. I also think it shows like good confidence, right? That you want to have in your head coach, especially like your new head coach, that he's not afraid to speak his mind and speak up when it counts.
Mhm. This they did a report. It's called the L2M report. Do you know what that stands for? L2M?
L2M? I
Oh,
feel like I
last 2
should.
minutes. Last 2 minutes.
Yeah,
That's what it is.
yeah,
Sorry, sorry, sorry.
yeah.
As I said
I
it
was
out
like,
loud,
that
I
is
was
on
like, duh.
NBA. That's like on NBA Media Central for sure. And I just never paid attention to it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So basically, they
Mhm.
said in the final 2 minutes of the game, there were only two incorrect calls made.
Hmm.
Both should have gone against the Raptors, the NBA said. So that's kind of a weird wrinkle in this whole thing. I mean, obviously, that doesn't include the entire fourth quarter,
Yeah.
or the entire game for that matter, in a really close game. So I don't know. Like, I always kind of like low key, just as a fan wanted to see an in-depth investigative report on officiating bias. You know what I mean? Like I just feel like you know, Raptors fans, like we always kind of have this chip on our shoulder, you know, it's us versus them. You know, the Americans always have this bias against us, right? Like even like in like you know, when people were going off about Scotty Barnes not being the face of the league, I'm like,
Mhm.
they don't want a Raptor. Sorry. They don't
No,
want
that
I'm
was
getting
good. It
fired up. I'm
added
getting
like yeah,
fired
yeah.
up. They don't want a Raptor to be the face of the league because they don't want to update their passports and they don't want to stand in a line, you know, at customs and all of that. Like during the NBA finals, like that's all they complained about. It was so annoying and it was so stupid. And I feel like that's what
Get
they're like.
Nexus, bros. Like,
Yeah,
dude,
literally.
you don't have it already? Get Nexus.
So I just feel like, you know, maybe the bias is real and it would be nice to have like a deep investigative, you know, an ombudsman. Is that what that's called?
Yeah, ombudsman? I don't think no, omnibus. Is that what you mean?
Omnibus?
Yeah,
I'm
I
not a
think you mean
lawyer.
omnibus, maybe? Ombudsman is a position.
Thank you, Katie.
Yeah, omnibus, a volume containing several novels or other items previously published separately. Well, it doesn't really fit, but I get what you mean.
Yeah, you know, an investigation of sorts.
Yeah.
A report.
Yeah, some type of report. I mean, I get that, but I also think like the NBA is like to some degree it has to stand by its officials no matter
All
like
right.
the crummy job they're gonna do. No, I don't
Okay, that's fine.
necessarily
Be the voice of reason,
I
Katie.
don't
That's fine.
necessarily agree with it. And I think yeah, we have also heard a lot of people I laugh when I hear people complain about like the customs line. You know, it's not like the referee like association or whatever can't like yeah, pay for your Nexus application. I'm sure they're good for it. You know,
Yeah,
that's a professional. That's like
it's a
they can
business
cover you. It's
expense.
a
Yeah.
business expense. Thank you. It's the word I was looking for. My melted brain. Um,
You and me both. I mean, look, like I agree with you in that like the
mhm.
NBA obviously has to stand by the refs and it has to stand by the integrity of the league itself. I do think in this day and age of, you know, legal sports gambling, why not? Like, I don't know what the checks and balances are for these guys. I don't know what kind of accountability they do have. I truly don't know.
I mean, there's like standards, right? There's like refereeing standards and protocol and things that get reviewed. I don't know if you remember that like hilarious apology. When did this happen? I think it was like last spring when the NBA referee Twitter account, the official Twitter account, made that like public apology about bad officiating, and it was like, we are so deeply heartbroken. Like it was
Yes, I do remember.
Yeah, it was why it was like so soapy. It was amazing. So I was kind of hoping for another one of those just for like
Yeah.
a really over the top worded apology. It's
Yeah.
just like we are beside ourselves with grief and mourning for our profession. Like it was
That's what I want
nuts.
for
Yeah.
us.
Yeah, I want
That's
that.
what I
I want
want.
that for us too, but I feel like it's the Raptors
not-
like you shouldn't really hold your breath.
No, I agree. We should not hold our breath. And the fact that it's Thursday and they still haven't, Thursday afternoon,
Yeah.
and they still haven't announced a fine yet,
I
means
know.
they're really thinking about it.
Yeah, I wonder, like, I'm thinking somewhere 30-35 range. I was just comparing it to like what Fred VanVleet got, but maybe it will be 40-45.
Maybe they're gonna do like an unprecedented, like largest fine ever for a coach complaining about the refs. I don't know.
Which I think would actually only add fuel to the fire in Darko's favor.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so too.
Yeah. And I also a part of me was like, I wonder if they're all gonna chip in and help pay for it.
Oh, they'll pay for it.
Yeah.
MLSE will pay for it.
No, I know. But like, yeah, but I meant like maybe they'll make like a thing of it. I don't know.
Like a GoFundMe. I'm kidding.
No, just like the players will do it.
Oh, like they'll yeah.
Yeah, like and they can use it for like Raptors open gym content. They'll be like, here we're all at the next pizza party and we'll put a big glass jar in the middle of the table and everyone throws in a few $100 bills. Something like that.
That would be fun open gym content. I agree. I agree.
Free idea for you guys at open gym, my friends.
Shout out to open gym. There we go. All right, let's move on for the rant. We're gonna have more Raptors stuff coming up later. I just usually it's like NBA first and then Raptors, and then sometimes like the Raptors thing is the biggest story in the league, and then
it was,
and it
across
really
the
was.
world. Yeah,
BBC Sports, I'm telling you.
That's
so anyway, so I've jumbled up the order a little bit here. So more Raptors homer moments coming up later. Okay. We got to talk about Draymond Green coming back from his suspension. I believe, they said he's going to spend a week ramping up. So they haven't announced the exact game, but probably early to mid next week, around Tuesday or so, he will return in uniform. He's had a lot to say, both on his podcast, which was about 50 minutes long, and then his press conference, which was a bit over 30 minutes long. He talked about almost contemplating retirement during this time. He's sought out counseling. Different people have reached out to him. There's a lot here. Katie, give me your initial thoughts, and then we'll try and dwindle this down a bit.
I mean, my initial thoughts are kind of with the Warriors, because the whole thing right now, I think their major problem is like their kind of morale is just like in the toilet.
Yeah.
But I think it actually started, unfortunately, I think it started with Draymond Green. And like the most most public fracture, I think, being that when he punched Jordan Poole in the face at practice, and when that that footage got out, and then when it was kind of downplayed along with a lot of his other actions in game this season, basically harming people. I think that was also kind of downplayed, but I think we've had like this steady, steady, the morale's just falling apart. They've been blown out like in two games in a row. Nobody looks happy. They keep talking about like we have to get healthy and we've got to get everybody back on the floor to a degree. Yeah, I believe that, because I also think that's just like the baseline. And I think that's like an automatic assumption that a lot of athletes and teams have. But I also can't necessarily see that happening is when everybody gets back, they will be like things are going to like turn around in a kind of 180 degree. I think the most telling thing for me about what he said, Draymond Green said on his podcast, was that he was going to retire. Because also I like put a real grain of salt on like how this conversation went down with Adam Silver. You know, I think probably Draymond Green's fresh new contract that he just signed has a bigger reason for him not wanting to retire than Adam Silver. But like, yeah, like when you're like told, not just by the commissioner, by your coach, by some of your closest teammates, you know, like Steph Curry, who's like also one of his closest friends, to basically like, you know, you gotta change your behavior going forward. Like this isn't really tenable. And then when you're asked to do that, you kind of throw up your hands and you're like, well, maybe I'll just retire. Like it's a very juvenile response to just being asked to take some responsibility for your actions. So that's kind of that was like a telling thing to me, but also a pretty big bummer to hear, because it's just like, how can you make this about yourself again? So I kind of question like what the time away was really spent on, you know, whether that was like worthwhile time. And not that anyone can actually have like, I'll just like put this out of the way too. Like, I don't also believe that anyone can have like a fundamental behavioral change in like 2 weeks away. Like that's definitely for optics. You know, I think you actually have to go away and like work on that yourself.
Yeah. That's the thing I wanted to touch on, because okay, personally, I've been in therapy for years and I don't even hit people. You know what I mean? Like how does he just change in like a month? You know, and like one thing like I haven't noticed or heard, and maybe it's been out there and it isn't in the things that I consumed, was that this counseling was going to in fact continue. Right? Like that is something like that to me would have been more encouraging. Like I got myself to a place where I feel like I can play again, but this is going to continue. You know, because what I sort of fear, I'll just use that for lack of a better term, is like everybody's gonna go after him so hard. Right? Like that's the problem with all of this, is that basically everyone guarding him is going to be Dylan Brooks. Because why wouldn't you be at this point, right? And for him to have the discipline to not cave in to people being the most antagonist version of themselves at all times is like excruciating for somebody like him. And you know, we're all waiting to see whether or not that's going to be sustainable or not. I imagine like while the spotlight's on him for like that first week or two, you know, he's just going to have his arms up like this, you know, like all the time. Like, I'm not hitting anybody. I'm not, you know, and then one day, like his guard's going to be down and it's like, it could happen again. And then what happens, you know? So I just feel like, yeah, I don't mean to be like so cynical, because I do want like the best for people, but I agree. You don't have like a core fundamental behavioral change after just like a month. I mean, like the only thing I could really compare that to is like rehab. Like you hear about people going to like, you know, drug and, you know, alcoholism, like rehab for like a month, and then they come out and then like maybe they're sober from then on. My brother, shout out Jason, 7 years sober. We're all very proud of him. And he, you know, he's been doing great things with his life since. Went to rehab. It didn't work the first time. Went to rehab the second time. Then it worked, but he had to keep going to meetings.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he had to keep going. He had to keep being supported by an entire community of people pretty much every day. And he still supports, like now he gives back and supports people. You know what I mean? So it doesn't just like end. And
no, there's maintenance. Yeah, there's like maintenance. And I think athletes kind of, it's, I don't know, I don't want to call it ironic, but it's like there's so much maintenance that goes into their lifestyle physically. And I think like the mental side of it and behavioral side of it can often just like, and I think this comes down to like fandom too. Like there's an expectation that people will just like bounce back or kind of get right. And that's not really how these things work, you know? Like I think of that, I think we've talked about it before, like that John Morant, when John Morant was like, I think it was a second suspension. But you know, when he was like, I went away and got treatment, but then they had that
Yes.
like weird ESPN special, like less than a week after, and they were like, tell us what you learned in your time away, when like he hadn't been away at all,
Yeah.
basically, right? You know, and I think like, and so much of this too, as you said, like is going to be focused on like proof and like the work that he's done, and a lot of that work, you know, ostensibly would have to be done in private if it's continual. And maybe it is, you know, like I kind of do want to give benefit of the doubt. Like maybe
Sure.
they
Yeah.
have brought in like someone on the team side of things to like talk to him about this stuff like going forward. And maybe that's a caveat of his return, though I do think that would have been mentioned in a press release somewhere along the way. But I don't know. I think he's built up such like a persona for himself in the league, almost like a caricature. I think it would also be difficult to get away from that and to almost like piece like what's the caricature and like how does my behavior feed into that, and like who can I be as an athlete without that. And I think like, you know, to go back to the backdrop of the Warriors like team situation right now, that obviously does not help.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I agree. Like, it's just, you know, like you said, the morale is at an all-time low. They were booed by their home crowd last night, you know, and then there's been various press conference clips about that have come out since. And, you know, it's just like to go through all of this and then rejoin your team while their morale is at an all-time low. This is like really one of the more challenging situations I've seen a team ever be in, to be honest.
Yeah. No, I think so. And that's why I kind of just wish we heard more. And I don't know, maybe that's just like, I'm just thinking out loud, but like maybe that is again like his caricature and like the persona he's like talking, like that's his podcast too, right? Like, so
Yeah.
maybe that leading into it. I don't know.
No, I think like that's such a huge point because, you know, prior to all of this, right, like this recent, you know, indefinite suspension and all of that, he would always say, like, quote, you know, like, this is who I am. Right. I mean, it's a bit of a paraphrase, not a quote, but you know what I mean? Like, he would say, like, this is who I am. And then it's like, okay, so like, we're basically saying, like, you know, this isn't just a, you know, it's more than just a behavior. This is a self identity. Right?
Yeah.
So I think, like, to what you're saying, like, yeah, like, you don't just, like that doesn't just change.
Yeah, and I like that's also like his, I hate to use this word, but like that's also his brand that he's created. Like there's a
Right.
lot tied up in that. So, you know, I don't want to like tread too deeply into psychoanalyzing a stranger, but I
Yeah.
do think like all this stuff kind of plays into it and is worth thinking about. I also do call a little bit BS on like Adam Silver basically being like, that conversation to me reads more like Adam Silver looking at the product of the NBA and being like, or also just like generally someone who's says you've asked them to do some kind of like simple behavior adjustment and they're like, well, I'm out of here. And then you're like, you're maybe being a little bit rash. I could see it going that way.
Which
And
is
then
what he said, which is what
yeah,
Draymond said he said was that,
yeah,
I think that's a bit rash.
yeah. I don't think it was like, you know, begging somebody to stick around. I think it was just like, like maybe look at your decision-making process here. And then Adam Silver is like a pretty savvy business.
And he's all business.
Yeah, exactly. And he
Yeah.
understands, I think, the draw of Draymond Green and of the Warriors franchise, you know. So there's a lot. I think there's just like a lot of layers is what I'm most confident in saying.
Yeah, you know, I just feel like, you know, and I really like the Warriors team, and I've said that on this podcast before. Obviously, I'm a Raptors fan first, but like, you know, I've always enjoyed watching the Warriors, and I think like Steph Curry's been one of the most exciting players I've ever watched in my lifetime. This is the most interesting losing team I've ever watched. You know what I mean? And it's like, you know, the downfall of this whole era is really like it's excruciating. Like, I just don't recall, you know, teams who won, you know, this many championships, give or take, and then the downfall of it being like this dramatic. this much of a disaster. You know what I mean? Like, the Spurs won 5 championships. They just, they knew it was over. They had to trade Kawhi, and then they rebuilt. But beyond like that whole Kawhi incident, it wasn't all of this. Or even like with the Lakers, like after like, that 5th Kobe championship, and then they tried to redo it with like Dwight Howard and Steve Nash, and then that didn't work out, and then he tore his Achilles. But like, I don't know, like this is like really on another level, I feel.
I think it is. And I mean, like social media, and I think the desire for information obviously like lends a lot to it too. Like that wasn't the backdrop for those other situations. Like we didn't necessarily have, different camps kind of leaking information and
Punching
like,
teammates.
yeah, like like phones everywhere at the ready, like to record that kind of stuff.
Wasn't Steve Kerr punched in a practice when he was a player by Jordan, right?
Yeah.
I feel like nobody talks about that when it comes to this whole situation, because in my mind, I'm like, that's why he thought they would get over it, because he got over it when he was punched.
Because he also has like such a different era of the NBA.
Yes.
Like he had to get over. Can you imagine? You're like Michael Jordan's
He had
teammate.
no choice.
It's like you got it. They're like, sorry, tough luck, buddy. To a degree, yeah, I think that's a really good point. I feel like there's a mirror situation going on. I mean, Steve Kerr is also, I wouldn't say blameless in any of this, because I think for a lot of what Draymond's done, he's kind of quiet, either like loudly or quietly condoned it, like
he's defended him so much.
Yeah. I think Steph Curry was the last person, with when Draymond hit Nurkic. I think Steph was the one who kind of came out and was just like, basically like, where are you? In the sense of like, where's this person I know? Like, where's my teammate? And that was like actually the most telling to me. And like, I think the kind of quote, like loudest comment I kind of heard anyone on the Warriors make, inclusive of Steve Kerr. So I would say like, yeah, Steve Kerr, not necessarily like the best at like, yeah, I know we just talked about like a coach like sticking their neck out for their team, like for the Darko side, but maybe this is like the flip side of it, where you kind of gotta back up a little bit and take a broader perspective.
I agree. Speaking of that, let's move on to our next topic, and I wanted to do a little coach's hot seat here as we approach the mid-season point. There's a lot of talk about like Darvin Ham possibly being on the hot seat with the Lakers, which I think is absolutely ridiculous in my opinion. Oh God, every time I get fired up.
It's good. It's like that really like
I have one opened, like I opened the wrapper, like I just have it like so
it's just this passionate growl that you've got.
The Rocola is here. But I just feel like, I don't know, like okay, this is such a basic fan take, and Katie, you were here to put me in my place. I'm just tired of LeBron being a bit of a coach killer, and I just feel like Darvin Ham got you to the Western Conference Finals last year. Like, can we give this guy some chance? And like literally the only complaint that I saw in the media was about rotations. And it's like, you can fix that. Rotation, like having different lineups, having different rotations, trying to figure things out. That's life. Like, what are we even talking about here? That's just life.
Yeah.
Like, how is that? I can't.
I don't even think it's that basic of a take. Like, I'm with you. I think there's like LeBron James always seems to have this line. I don't even think it's invisible anymore. It's just like, I'm sure people have actually counted like how many games it takes with a coach to kind of that coach. I said him, but yeah, it's always been a dude. For them to like fall out of favor, right, with LeBron. Whether that's because of just like things he's hearing or seeing, or like, things are taking a little while. I actually like have come around, I think, on Darvin Ham. Probably the most this season. Though, yeah, you make a good point. That Lakers team last year was not good, and they still made it. Like they kind of clawed their way up towards the end of the season. And yeah, like they took advantage of like a strange Western Conference. and they made it to the Western Conference Finals. Like, that is coaching. That's like team talent, and absolutely, but that's coaching too. So, but I think this year, and when I've heard him be pretty honest in some of these post games and like honestly kind of show his frustration. I think it was like last week or something when he was just like, look, like it's a really long season. Like none of these changes are going to be immediate, you know, like we have, and I think maybe he was talking about the rotational stuff, but it's like we have time to implement it. But you know what? That takes like time and effort and buy-in from everybody else. So he was just like, you know, I think there's like a lot, I think he was speaking to expectations of fans as well, and media is probably, you know, you could fold them in there too, but for things to be so instantaneous to click and that not really being the case, even if on paper like the team looks kind of the same, or like why would there be, you know, growing pains and changes? But if you look closer, of course there will be, because like, you know, guys like Austin Reeves are going to get way more minutes this year. Anthony Davis is so healthy, like he's healthy and he's playing like out of his mind. You know, and you've got to be able to like balance and kind of share this growth and like create other like developmental opportunities around your roster to have like a whole complete team, and like also just like a team that's like what's the word? God damn, like fit enough. So by the time like the playoffs roll around, you know, like they're used to playing, everyone is used to playing the kind of minutes it's going to take to like get all the way to the finals, because ostensibly that's what they want, right? So it always kind of it does confuse me a little bit, because like if anyone knows that, it is LeBron James. So maybe this is like one of those things where you see someone who has just like otherworldly talent and has like has you know, like applied himself so much to year over year, just like, I don't know, bodily maintenance and his athleticism and health. And like, that's his sole focus. But still, I think a lot of things do have come to him a lot easier because of that talent, maybe reckoning with people who aren't that. Like maybe he's just like, maybe it gets to a certain point where he's like, well, I've always been able to do this, so it's difficult to see it from like another perspective. But that might be giving him too much of like a silver lining. But I do wonder about that sometimes.
No, I completely agree. Like, I just feel like why I don't know. I just feel like a player as, you know, smart as LeBron, because I do think he's a really smart player.
Yeah, that's the other thing. He's very, very smart.
Why wouldn't you have the patience for these adjustments? Like that part of it, I don't understand. So I don't know if there's like, you know, disagreements behind the scenes. Maybe he feels like, you know, it should go a different way. And I don't know about all of that. But yeah, I feel like ever since LeBron has gotten to the Lakers, their coach is in firing rumors every year.
And then he like kind of looks fondly back on coaches he's fallen out with. Like he made that little comment, like someone asked him about how well the Clippers were doing, and he was like, "Yeah, you gotta give Ty Lue
disco birthday party
his credit." But like Ty, it's like I'm pretty sure there were times like you made Ty's life like miserable.
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah,
I was kind of like, leave Ty alone. Like he's doing great things with the Clippers. That team is very fun to watch. Don't bring him to don't make him like show up to that arena for a different team.
Yeah, I agree. Another coach I want to talk about who like I can't believe this isn't a bigger conversation is Monty Williams. Like how this guy is paid so much money. And he has the second highest contract in the league until this very recent Spoelstra deal.
Yeah.
He was literally brought on to elevate this Pistons team. He's done anything but. This CBS Sports article that I found says that their core four of Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, and Austin Thompson have together combined an average of 5.4 minutes per game. So, like, I don't know what NBA sicko or whoever's paid to actually analyze this Detroit Pistons team, because they're otherwise unwatchable. So I feel like that's like just something that isn't reported on enough. Like this article is actually criticizing his rotations. which to me is wild. And I'm just like, and now Cade's injured and he's gonna be out for like several weeks. So, somebody was saying that like this, like the Detroit Pistons could end up having a longer losing streak than their last losing streak of 28 games because they don't even have Cade.
Yeah. It's a reality. I mean, I'm still like, and this is fine if it's like my delusion, but I do really stand by this, that like the team is too good to be this bad. And I understand like people are going to knock on the personnel. But what I also mean by that is like when you look around at the league in general, like the talent, it's like an all boats rise, right? Like the talent has become so much better and like so much more dense that it is actually very hard to be bad for such a long time. It's like it's more hindering to a lot of these athletes who are themselves very technically good. So yeah, I think in Detroit's case, like I just wrote about this a couple weeks ago, I went really in depth on it because I was also a little bit baffled. I historically love the Pistons, so it stinks to see them playing this way. And I thought, okay, like Monty, he like has, worked well with like young players. That's pretty much like that roster is so young. It seems like a good change. It's also like there's something to be said for a franchise that is like not doing so well, putting up a lot of money for like a high caliber quality coach like that, because it also shows you're investing in your athletes, and you would think that would also kind of like go a little bit or a long way for them. My sense is it's not buy-in from the players, because when we've heard from them, they've been pretty honest about like how frustrated they are. They don't think they're this bad either. Like they're a little bit at a loss. I feel like Monty hasn't necessarily shown up in the way that at least like I anticipated him to do right away. Maybe I could see also being like, oh, I'm going to take like the first month or two max to really get a lay of the land. And in that situation where you're like, okay, wins, losses don't really matter. We're going to get a sense of the rotations and who we've got and strengths and weaknesses, etc. But like, it's well beyond that point now. So I don't actually understand. Like it's like, I don't want to criticize to the point where I'm like, he seems checked out, but it's difficult to see what the plan is, and I think, is that because there's like a lot of this franchise is moving in different directions, from its coach to its like front office to its owner, maybe like, are there different like ideas of where they want things to go? But yeah, like it's kind of bizarre, because I'm like, what are you gonna do? Like, are you gonna fire him? Like, you can't really fire him
because he's too expensive to fire.
Yeah, you'd have to buy him out, and also then you're kind of like, what do you do then? Like, who do you bring in? I mean, there will still be people lining up to want to get their first shot at a head coaching job for sure, but you're not really looking at bringing in that kind of caliber of coach. So I don't know. Like, I don't think it can be that much of a misfit, because Monty Williams has done great things for other teams and other players specifically. He definitely like has his favorites on that team, but that's also what your assistant coaching staff is for, right?
Yeah,
to round that kind of stuff out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like they don't have a choice. I feel like this was a terrible investment on their part. I do think he is checked out. I mean, after, he was let go from Phoenix, I think he wasn't necessarily going to coach again. Or he
said as much, right? Like, he wanted to take a year off.
He wanted to take a year off, and then they offered him like too much money. And then he said yes. And, maybe that was a mistake. Right. So I just feel like, maybe they ride it out the rest of the season, but like, man, I don't know how they bring that guy back next year. Like, I think, with this many losses, you need a new voice in that locker room, at least. Like, I was talking to just a buddy of mine, and I was joking, like they need to just go on like a weekend retreat in like Montana and just show up at like Phil Jackson's ranch and just like smoke some weed and just listen to like some sage words and just like reconnect with nature.
I thought you were gonna say like listen to the Grateful Dead.
Oh, well, maybe that too. They probably don't even know who that is. And then just like Yeah, and then see if they can like reconnect.
Mhm.
Because I just don't even know what else I would do at this point.
Mhm. It's a bummer too, because like, again, I think, you look back at their, like, last few draft classes and, like, the picks that they've gotten and the way that they, like, tried to build up this team, like, there is intentionality there. I don't think it's for nothing, and these are talented athletes, and you hate to see people kind of, quote, like, wasting their like, these kinda young, really, like, I think, important seasons of their NBA careers, like not getting better, not improving, not learning. Um, but it's like it is a mystery now. And I think a lot of people have tried to solve it. I took a crack at it. I have to like really tip my hat to their beat writers, and the
Yeah,
people like
yeah,
that are there like in the trenches with them and have to figure out like how to tell compelling stories about this team that aren't just like we keep losing. You
yeah.
know? But it's, I don't know, I really can't see them firing him. I can see maybe the owner, like, selling the team before, you
Selling the
know?
team?
Maybe. That guy's got his own mess of like, he's
I don't
involved with,
know.
like, prison, like, scandals, like, I don't know,
Whoa, I
like,
didn't know
it's
this. There's a
yeah.
prison scandal?
He buys companies, he is like one of these for companies that buys other struggling companies and then sells them off, but he bought this company called Securus, which is, this is actually it's like a horrible business. They charge people, families of incarcerated people about $1 a minute, sometimes as much as, to make phone calls, to them in prison, and I think it's something like 1 in 4 families are often bankrupted because it's just like it's untenable. It's like a wild expense to have to pay to call somebody who's in prison. Anyway, the owner of the Pistons owns this company, and there's been all these like public I think, there's been all these, like, public defense people taking out, like there have been ads taken out in the New York Times against him because he said, "Okay, I'm gonna divest with this." Obviously, it's not a smart business decision for somebody who owns a predominantly black basketball team in a predominantly black league when predominantly the people that are incarcerated are, like, black and brown men, and that's who this other company he owns is, like, preying upon. But he has, like, yet to divest. He's canceled meetings with, like, families and lawyers of families to, like, ask for fairer rates. He's come out and been like, I don't just buy things and then, like, sell them for parts and not make them better," but, like, really he hasn't said how he's gonna improve anything there. It's worth looking into. You could anyone who is interested, I wrote about that also in the thing I wrote about the Pistons. It's at Basketball Feelings, but yeah, it's worth looking into. It's pretty I mean, as far as NBA owners go, like, a lot of them are into some pretty nefarious stuff, but, like, this is definitely up there.
That is pretty gross.
Mhm.
Yeah, wow, I did not know that.
Mhm.
Yeah, maybe I mean, I would hate for Detroit to not have a team. I mean, they have a storied history. They have multiple
Absolutely.
championships in 2 different eras.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't wanna live in a world where it's like the Seattle Pistons, you know?
Has it gone that far? People saying, like, I don't know, I feel like you couldn't. I mean,
No, I don't think so. I mean, they didn't lose the Supersonics, or the Sonics name because it's the OKC Thunder, but,
if they
oh,
moved if it's as
that would be really heartbreaking.
that would be awful. That would be absolutely awful. Like, you're already, like, doing, I think, people in DC pretty badly by moving the Wizards, which are themselves also a terrible basketball team, but they are still, like, people's terrible basketball team, They
Yeah,
have, like, they have a rooted interest there, and it's just, like, at the whims of owners who are like, "I could make more money if I move this team somewhere else."
yeah, they're moving to, Virginia, is that
Yeah,
it? Yeah.
yeah.
Um, all right, let's move on to our Raptors homer moment. Um, I was saying it last week, we're fully in this BBQ era, but whether it's a spicy BBQ era remains to be seen.
I had to
Yeah.
look up I had to not look I didn't actually look it up. I, like, pieced it out when I was getting ready. I was like, "BBQ. You can figure this out." I hadn't, like, seen the acronym going around yet on Raptors
Oh,
Twitter, I
really? I've
guess.
I've
Yeah.
seen it. I've
But
seen it.
I figured it out on my
I
own.
didn't make it up. I didn't make it up. But yeah, like I feel like we're kind of in this weird sort of thing where like the team's really gelling. Things are going really well.
Mhm.
Sucks so much that Pascal was out last night. Really hope he's okay. I always get nervous when a player has a back related injury. It's just spasms, but still, hopefully he's good.
Mhm.
But it's like, I was more pro trading Pascal prior to the OG trade. Now that that's happened and this team is clicking, it's like, oh wait, maybe we have something here. He's
Mhm.
also expressed a desire to stay. So, if I think at this point they only make a deal if they have a hunch that he wouldn't stay in free agency,
Mhm.
a la OG. But I'm also like more pro keeping this whole thing together than I was even like, 3 weeks ago. So, Katie, have your feelings changed around that? Or do you see a trade on the horizon that you hope the Raptors make?
No, I've had such a weird, like, ride with this. I was on the radio last week, and I was like, "Yeah, you've already traded OG," so, like, that first kinda painful domino has
Mm,
fallen, and I will say it is still like, it's one of those things where my brain has just, like, put it somewhere else, so, like, when I see pictures of OG now or, like, highlights of him in, like, a Knicks uniform, I'm like, "I don't know what this is," Like, I refuse to see it,
I'm
but
somehow, like, weirdly a Knicks fan now, like, I'm just,
yeah.
like, rooting for them for the first time in my life.
Which
Anyway.
is fair, they're great now, but I was kind of at that time, I was kind of the mind, like and that was only, I think, about 2 games in to, like, the quickly and RJ being here era. It's like, well, you've done that one, you've kinda ripped the Band-Aid off. Why not just, like, do this other trade you've been kinda dragging your heels on as a
Yeah.
franchise? Though, I will say I've now, like, like, changed my mind on that because this is sort of the ideal. Like, this is what the way that the team is playing with Pascal, Scotty, quickly, and at all, like, is how you wanted the team to play all last season, certainly between, like, Pascal and Scotty and OG, and then to the start of this season, and just something wasn't really working, and to the point where it became, like, I think these arguments are silly of, like, whose team is it, It's like, theoretically, it should be all of their team because, like, that's the core you want. Like, that's the winning core, but it would seem so difficult, in the past for all these guys to be having good games, consistently together, right, on any given night. It would just be, like, someone's game one night, someone's game the next. Um, but, for whatever reason, this trade has kind of nicely finessed things. I wouldn't say it's, like,
Mhm.
really shaken things up, but it has really nicely finessed things and given a lot of, like, certainly shooting and offensive, like, energy, and I think maybe a bit more offensive flexibility and certainly quickness. You know, and RJ, of course, like, has shown up in a way that, like, I did not anticipate.
Right, yeah.
Which is wonderful, like, which is, like, a wonderful, like, side effect of this trade, but now I'm like, "Well, why wouldn't you hang on to Pascal Siakam, who is your second best player, arguably, some nights still your first best player?" Because again, like, as you said he wants to stay, he said that, like, over I don't know anyone who said it more,
Yeah.
like, he said it over and over, and I think right now, like, the best decision would be, of course, to extend him. I don't know if you wanna get into, like, can we talk I don't really wanna talk about, like, can the team offer him the max if, like, that's exactly what he's going after this summer? Probably they can, like, the front office is good for it, but, um, yeah, now I think you hang on to him.
This is the thing that I'm confused about with the extension. So, Katie, you can fill me in here.
Well, I
I
hope I
feel like
can.
I think you can. I feel like okay, this is what I'm confused about. If we don't extend him, right? And then he's a free agent.
Mm,
There's this idea of like he needs to be traded now, which would, in my view, lessen his trade value.
mhm.
But if we extended him, then we don't have this we have to trade him now thing. And then his trade value would therefore increase, would it not? Like that's the part of this I'm confused about.
Trade value is also just, like, such an arbitrary like, it is such an arbitrary construct, but
Uh-huh.
and I think you can even see that at work from, like, Pascal Siakam's trade value quote last week to this week, and how many teams have now come around and, like, wanted to be engaged with the Raptors in talks for Pascal Siakam. When I think around the OG trade, the reason that went first because it was like the easier trade to execute. I think like the Raptors really didn't have their. I think for a lot of like our tenure, like in this era of the Raptors, as like fans, we've seen, Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster really be able to like manipulate the market to their whims, right? Like and like they control the market, and I think that had changed, and like that had changed in a maybe confusing way to the front office too, that they were asking for a lot more than any other team seemed willing to offer. I thought it was like pretty preposterous to ask like someone like the Kings, for example, for Keegan Murray when it's like like they love Keegan Murray. Like that team is obsessed with him. Like they did try to draft his twin brother. Like that's how much they love this family. But like, to be serious, like why would they? But that is a trade where in the past, if you offered someone like Pascal Siakam, they probably would part with, a second-year player who's playing incredibly well, but you're like, well, we can also get this sure thing, and that like ceased to really be the case. So that's just like, I think a good example of how value.
Yeah, well, and they
really
already did it
fluctuates.
with Halliburton and Sabonis, right?
Exactly.
So it's
Yeah,
like I don't know why they would do it again.
exactly. I think like do extend just makes sense now because it also takes some of the anxiety off, like for everyone involved, right? Like least of all the fan base, but like certainly for Pascal Siakam in the front office. And then you also get out of the situation that's kind of looming over, I think, the front office's decision-making skills, which is like they can't afford to let another player just walk.
Yeah.
So the extension makes sense to me because like now you actually have a team that is functioning in the way you wanted them to at the beginning of the season, which is probably as like best case, like a play-in team.
Yeah.
Maybe depending on how, the rest of the season shakes out. Maybe like a lower, like securing kind of like a lower berth in the playoffs at best, but like that's always what this team was going to be this season, and that's kind of that's the best you're hoping for. Now they actually do look like that. So why not hang on to someone who has like said time and time again, like they want to stay, they can contribute, they're playing really well, with the new people that you've added around them.
Yeah.
It seems like a no-brainer. Versus just like going out to get a deal done for the sake of now, it just seems like a deal.
I completely agree. And I also feel like, as somebody who also pays attention to like NBA media outside of our Raptors circle, it feels like I feel like other NBA people feel like the Raptors owe it to them to save another team. Like that's what a lot of these trade talks feel
Interesting.
like as
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like almost like we need to save the Warriors, and like stuff like this. Like they need saving. And it's like, why would that be on us? Like that. I feel like just that is what frustrates me the most.
It's like it's like this is a really crude example, but it's like organ donation. It's like the Raptors are the body on the table, and like, yeah.
Yeah. And
it could save these other teams.
Right. And it's just like, when we were when we were playing the Warriors in that blowout game, it's like, wait a second, the wrong team is tanking here. Don't you think? It's like everyone's expecting the Raptors to tank, and it's like we don't have all of their issues as we laid out earlier in this podcast.
Yeah.
Like we're the team that's actually figuring things out. So I just feel like, the OG trade has changed everything in my view in terms of like Pascal specifically. And I've always loved Pascal. I always will. Like I've said before on this podcast, like, you look at him as like a person and his story and how he came into this league. And it's like, he's like literally the reason why we watch sports. You know what I mean? Like that he embodies the reasons why we love sports. Like I'm always going to love this guy. And I feel like, we always complain about, free agents. They don't want to sign here, blah, blah, blah. And now we have a player of his caliber who we've developed here who wants to stay despite everything. Like, I think people should value how much he actually wants to stay. I think I was on this podcast like literally a week ago where I was like, why would he even want to still be here? You know what I mean? Like fans have been terrible. Not every fan, shout out people who listen.
No,
to this
he's
podcast.
had some
I think we're
things.
good people. But he's had some awful things thrown his way, but he wants to stay despite all of that. Like, come on. I don't know. Am I just going crazy? Do I need another Ricola? Like, am I just going crazy here?
No, I think it makes sense. I think like sometimes it is best to like listen to your players. I know there was that like piece a couple days ago about like he was iced out by the front office this summer. But like I mean, you can take from that what you will. Like I'm sure the truth is always like somewhere in the middle of these stories, right?
Right.
In our
Yeah.
interpretations of
I
it.
mean,
It's yeah.
I still trust, Bobby and Masai to make a good deal if they insist on it.
Mhm.
We'll see. Like,
Mhm.
um, but it just feels weird. I just feel like a team with someone like Pascal would have treated him better, dare I say?
Yeah, I think there are like definitely were growing pains. But to a degree, like you would anticipate those, I think. You don't want really smooth sailing 100% of the time, or like nobody's changing, right? Like nobody's getting any better or like changing the way that they do things. And Pascal's had plenty of like upsets and kind of shakeups in his tenure as a Raptor. I think he's like weathered them all pretty well. He is just like the iced out thing was interesting to me because like Pascal is also like a pretty quiet person. Like he's not this kind of like gregarious. He certainly has that side, but like, I think he gets a lot of flack for like maybe not stepping into like a leadership role, but like maybe that's not something he ever wanted or felt like naturally inclined to do. And like he
Mhm.
actually is now on a team where it's functioning in a way where he doesn't have to have that role anymore. And he seems quite comfortable and is playing like because of it. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I know like it's funny that as like a team, the Raptors are usually quite hesitant to kind of make mid-season moves, and tinkering. But then everyone was, of course, like clamoring for one. It happened, and now I'm trying to like think, okay, am I just nervous now of being like, it's fine, like stop messing around, like you fixed it. Like that's where I think I get off of being like, don't make a trade just for the sake of making a trade to like appease some other teams who need someone right now.
Yeah.
But it is important to note also too, like a lot of the power still rests with Pascal. Like he can refuse the way that he's positioned. Like he can kind of turn down a deal if he doesn't really like where he's going because he like a team that does sign him kind of wants the security of like, okay, he's going to re-sign with us. So like you're not going to send him to some middling team because he's just going to walk. So they're not going to want that trade. So the power is still like really with Pascal in this, which is like another side of it that I like. But yeah, I think ultimately like all parties involved are leading towards like, let's just extend this guy.
Yeah, which is why the Sacramento deal, or there was a rumored Sacramento deal that didn't fall through because he said he wouldn't re-sign there.
Mm-hmm.
Wild stuff.
I think I also saw someone from Sacramento being like, it's not our fault he doesn't want to play in a bigger city. And I was like, dude, I've been to Sacramento. It's not a bigger city than Toronto.
That is just classic American
That's pretty American. Yeah.
stuff there.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to our hottie highlight of the week. And this goes to whoever organized the team bike ride,
Mm-hmm.
which looked like it was Venice Beach or Santa Monica.
I think it was on one of the LA beaches, probably
Yes.
Venice. I'm trying to think. No, maybe Santa Monica. No, probably Venice because it's a little not as busy as Santa Monica.
Yeah, yeah. A team bike ride. Really enjoyed that. Really felt like it connected everyone. You saw guys being like, I haven't been on a bicycle in years. And I was like, oh man. As someone who has biked in this city as a full adult.
No,
Uh,
I love that, man. I loved it too because I saw behind the scenes, I saw Greg Verman, he's like one of the lead guys in Open Gym. He posted a picture of him in one of these little sidecar kind of buggies that goes in front of the bike
oh
in
yeah.
it with the camera to get some of those shots, which like just
Oh,
made the
that's so
entire thing
cool.
cuter to me. To just like get the shots at all costs because some of them I'm like, how did they get them? Like Quickly's, I think, especially when he wiped out on the sand, which was definitely a highlight. Though I was like, please be careful.
Yeah, I know.
Don't hurt. Like you can, as someone who's like been in bike accidents, like you could really get hurt.
Yeah.
I think that was just like a GoPro or something like rigged up to the front, but like to get some of those other shots, I was really wondering. So it was like nice to see a little bit like behind.
Yeah, the budget
magic.
on open gym increasing.
I think it's just the capacity to rent a sidecar bike attachment.
Sure, but still, I don't know.
MLSE ponied up for that. Yeah.
I've always dreamed of being in one of those little sidecar things, but I'm also like a 5'10" woman. And I feel like, would I even fit? You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, oh, this would be so fun and cute. And then it's like, I am not tiny.
Like in a motorcycle situation?
Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? And I'm just like, I don't know.
I think they make the motorcycle ones, I think, are big enough.
But it might be like an XL sidecar. You know,
I've seen like grown men in those, you know?
Really? All right.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I you know, I'm someone who cares a lot about leg room.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Don't dash this dream.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. On that, maybe we wrap it up. Wait, did you want to say something?
No, I just wanted to again say how cute I found that. I watched it in the midst of like a half waking up, half still asleep fever dream in my sickness, and it really like brought some positivity to my day.
See, we needed smiles as we heal from our various colds here. Katie, thank you so much for joining me this week. Let everybody know what you're up to and where they can find you on the internets.
Yeah, you can find me, as I mentioned earlier, at basketballfeelings.com. There's a newsletter and a podcast there. I guess on a lot of other fronts, I've been a little bit quiet because I am working on writing a book. So that, as people say, does take up a lot of your time.
Yeah.
So Basketball Feelings is probably the best one for now. And you can find me on Twitter at WTEVS, WTEVS.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Katie. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week. Bye.